The Rio Rancho Public Schools Special Services Department presents disability awareness training. This training will provide you with information about disability categories, compliance with federal laws, Section 504 and Title II, as well as what constitutes disability harassment and discrimination, and how to respond when it occurs. Take a moment and reflect on the following questions on the next 2 slides. At the end of this training, you should be able to answer these questions. What is your level of knowledge about the various disabilities? What is your level of knowledge about the district's responsibility to comply with Section 504 and Title II? What is your level of knowledge about disability discrimination and disability harassment? What is your comfort level supporting students with disabilities? What is your level of knowledge of strategies to support students with disabilities in the classroom? What is your awareness level of resources available to assist you in supporting students with disabilities? The Individual with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, lists 13 different disability categories under which 3 through 21-year-olds may be eligible for services. For a child to be eligible for services, the disability must affect the child's educational performance. The disability categories listed in IDEA are autism, deaf-blindness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment including deafness, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, visual impairment including blindness. Developmental delay is considered to be a discrete additional category of disability under IDEA for children ages 3 through 9 and is to be used only as a last resort. For example, when the child's assessed characteristics do not fit the eligibility requirements of any of the existing IDEA disability categories, for children aged 3 through 9, a state and local education agency such as a district may choose to include as an eligible child with a disability a child who is experiencing developmental delays in one or more of the following areas: physical development, cognitive development, communication development, social or emotional development, or adaptive development, and who, because of the developmental delays, need special education and related services. In recent years, individuals with disabilities have benefited from passages of federal laws. While these laws address many aspects of daily life for individuals with disabilities, the following 3 federal laws have a major impact on the education of students with disabilities. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, and Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Both Section 504 and Title II are enforced by the Office of Civil Rights, OCR. Section 504 covers all schools, school districts, and colleges and universities receiving federal funds. Title II covers all state and local entities, including school districts and public institutions of higher education, whether or not they receive federal funds. Students in school settings fall under the protection of Section 504, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability from all school programs and activities in both public and private schools receiving direct or indirect federal funding. This also includes public charter schools. Section 504 could be a service option available to students with disabilities who have been evaluated and met Section 504 identification criteria. Section 504 is designed to provide equal access and fairness in general education to students with disabilities, thereby leveling the playing field for them through what is known as a Section 504 accommodation plan. It is not a plan designed to enhance a student's performance. It is only a plan to provide fairness and equal access to education. A student is identified for and entitled to a Section 504 accommodation plan if an evaluation shows that the individual has a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. This determination is based on a current evaluation and made by a Section 504 committee, including the parent. In New Mexico, the Student Assistance Team, SAT, is the starting point to consider whether or not a student needs to be evaluated for a Section 504 accommodation plan. When a student has not responded positively to research-based interventions in a SAT intervention plan and/or has a suspected disability, the SAT may determine that it needs to consider that the student be evaluated for a Section 504 accommodation plan. There is no state or federal funding provided to assist in complying with Section 504. All costs are the obligation of the school district's operational budget. Section 504 district procedural requirements are as follows. Whenever a district applies for state or federal funds, it must assure that it does not discriminate on the basis of race, sex, color, national origin, age, or disability by signing assurance forms. This is done routinely during a district's application for funds. Districts with 15 or more employees must designate an employee to be a 504 coordinator to coordinate efforts to comply with Section 504. Provide public notice regarding non-discrimination and responsibilities. Develop or adopt and implement grievance procedures which incorporate due process standards to resolve complaints of discrimination. Child find responsibilities. The district shall maintain an ongoing program to identify and locate children with disabilities within their jurisdiction who are not receiving a public education. Provide annual notice to students with disabilities and their parents or guardians of the district's responsibilities under Section 504 to identify and locate every qualified child with a disability who is not receiving a public education. Provide parents or guardians with procedural safeguards. Conduct a self-evaluation of school facilities, programs, and policies to ensure that discrimination is not taking place. Disability harassment is a form of discrimination prohibited by Section 504 and Title II. Both Section 504 and Title II provide parents and students with grievance procedures and due process remedies at the local level. Individuals and organizations also may file complaints with OCR, the Office of Civil Rights. Disability harassment may deny a student an equal opportunity to education under Section 504 or Title II. Disability harassment under Section 504 and Title II is intimidation or abusive behavior toward a student based on disability that creates a hostile environment by interfering with or denying a student's participation in or receipt of benefits, services, or opportunities in the institution's program. Harassing conduct may take many forms, including verbal acts and name-calling, as well as nonverbal behavior, such as graphic and written statements, or conduct that is physically threatening, harmful, or humiliating. When harassing conduct is sufficiently severe persistent, or pervasive, that it creates a hostile environment, it can violate a student's rights under Section 504 and Title II regulations. A hostile environment may exist even if there are no tangible effects on the student where the harassment is serious enough to adversely affect the student's ability to participate in or benefit from the educational program. Here are some examples of harassment that could create a hostile environment. Several students continually remark out loud to other students during class that a student with dyslexia is, quote, retarded, or, quote, deaf and dumb, and does not belong in the class. As a result, the harassed student has difficulty doing work in class, and her grades decline. A student repeatedly places classroom furniture or other objects in the path of classmates who use wheelchairs, impeding the classmates' ability to enter the classroom. A teacher subjects a student to inappropriate physical restraint because of conduct related to his disability, with the result that the student tries to avoid school through increased absences. A school administrator repeatedly denies a student with a disability access to lunch, field trips, assemblies, and extracurricular activities as punishment for taking time off from school for required doctor appointments related to the student's disability. A professor repeatedly belittles and criticizes a student with a disability for using accommodations in class, with the result that the student is so discouraged that she has great difficulty performing in class and learning. Students continually taunt or belittle a student with an intellectual disability by mocking and intimidating him so he does not participate in class. Disability harassment limits or denies a student's ability to participate in or benefit from an educational institution's programs or activities. When the institution learns that disability harassment may have occurred, the institution must investigate the incidents promptly and take effective action to end the harassment and prevent it from recurring, and, where appropriate, remedy the effects on the student who was harassed. Remember, awareness is not the same as emphasis. We must understand the disability, not focus solely on the disability. Another important quote, "Ask me what I can do, not what I can't do." Of course, as we develop a student's individualized education plan, IEP, we always start with the student's strengths, and only after a review of their strengths do we begin to address areas of need. This is a strengths-based model. If all you see is the disability, you are missing a lot. People with disabilities are people with special needs. Interact with the individual as a person first. The rationale behind using people-first language is that it recognizes that someone is a person, a human being, or a citizen first, and that the disability is a part, but not all of them. Thus, it asks for one to respect the disability community as first and foremost a community of people. Experiencing a disability. The next few slides you may find challenging and/or frustrating. Do your best. Look at the chart and say the color, not the word. Do that now. Your right brain tries to say the color, but your left brain insists on reading the word. Count the black dots. Do you see the face? Or an Eskimo? What you see depends on your perception. If you take a look at the picture, let me tell you it is not animated. Your eyes are making it move. To test this, stare at one spot for a couple seconds and everything will stop moving. Or look at the black center of each circle and it will stop moving. If you move your eyes to the next black center and the previous black center, the picture will move after you take your eyes away from it. Are the horizontal lines parallel or do they slope? Is this a picture of an old woman or a young girl? Here's a hint. The old woman's nose is the young girl's chin. Let's review your experiences. Were any of the activities frustrating to you? Was it frustrating or embarrassing to not be able to complete some of the tasks? Experiencing a disability through these activities is in no way the same as living with a disability. However, we can draw some comparisons from these activities. Students with disabilities oftentimes may become frustrated or embarrassed if they are not able to complete the same work as their peers. Students with disabilities may avoid tasks in part or whole, or attempt to seek or receive attention by acting out. Students with disabilities may have poor expressive and/or receptive communication skills. Finally, students with disabilities may experience issues with sensory or multisensory stimulation. For example, sensitivity to auditory stimulation, visual stimulation, tactile or touch, and/or proprioceptive motion stimulation. What can you do to facilitate access and success for students with disabilities? Below are some examples that can be provided to all students that may facilitate access and success. First, give positive reinforcement. By definition, positive reinforcement is a stimulus that follows an event and increases the chance of this event reoccurring. Some teachers do not believe in positive reinforcement because they do not want to reward students for just doing what is expected. This attitude is unfortunate. Positive reinforcement naturally occurs in everyone's daily lives, from infants to the oldest adult. For example, when people obey traffic laws and they do not get a ticket, they are rewarded by not having to take the driver's test when their license is due. People go to work every day, show up on time, work hard, and are rewarded by a paycheck. A person who is kind to others is rewarded by kindness offered back to them. The list could go on and on. All of these rewards increase the chance that people will continue to choose these positive behaviors. That is positive reinforcement. Another example is to decrease the length of tasks and divide it into smaller parts. This is an example of an accommodation that allows access for a student who may have difficulty with large tasks. Take frequent breaks. This accommodation allows an opportunity to minimize any frustration or to provide an opportunity to regroup or think ahead for the next step in a task. Keep consistent daily schedules. A routine schedule is extremely important and helps create a well-run program because staff, students, and parents know what is expected. Provide stress balls and other inconspicuous items for stimulation. Fidgets and stress toys really do de-stress the body and help increase focus and attention. Fidgets have particular properties that intrigue our sensory systems. The components could be the interesting tactile composition, such as squeezable or spiky massagers, heaviness or pliability of the product, movement opportunities it provides our hands. Can the student squeeze it? Does not make any noise, so it's not a distraction to others. Several different ones that are small enough to put in pockets. Adults most frequently use their fidgets near the telephone. Language production is a high-level task and creates both positive and negative stress in our system. We doodle, flip things in our hands, and do this naturally to keep our brains thinking better. In a school, a language-filled learning environment, some teachers and speech and language therapists consider fidgets tools or strategies and create a toolbox that can be manipulated during circle time, discussion groups, or where focus is required. Allow for movement. When sit still and pay attention isn't enough to get them paying attention, that's when fidgets work best, combined with things that allow a little movement, such as a variety of seating options, seat wedges, partially inflated discs on chairs, etc. Physical activity throughout the school day is necessary for students to re-energize themselves and to be able to maintain focus on their schoolwork. Being involved in movement positively affects children both cognitively and physically. Movement activities can be initiated by teachers throughout the day and especially during classroom transitions. Break down concepts into small, simple components. When most of us have a job to complete, we break it down into smaller steps. This is known as task analysis and can be used to help students gain independence. Task analysis is the process by which a task is broken down into its component parts. Everyone uses task analysis at some point, even if it is unconsciously. How else would anyone learn to complete processes? As the adage goes, you have to walk before you can run. It is easy to forget that some tasks need to be broken down into chunks, because after a time they become like second nature to us. We often expect students to be able to figure out the steps involved in completing a task. But with a special needs population, where you might have students with processing disorders or difficulty with organization, it is necessary to take the time to express the different parts of a task until the student has mastered each one. For example, consider telling a student to put his coat on to go home at the end of the day. It seems self-explanatory, yet when you think about it, there are several steps involved. Where is the coat? If the student isn't already holding it, he has to go to the location to retrieve it. Once that is accomplished, how does he put on the coat? He could just stick his arms in, but then it would be backwards. He could lay it on the floor, stick both arms in upside down, and then flip it overhead, but that in itself is 3 steps. He could put one arm in and then send the coat around his back until he finds the other sleeve to put his arm into. That's 3 more steps. Finally, should he just leave the coat hanging open? Is there a zipper, snaps, or buttons? Working any of those fasteners requires several operations, so the simple instruction of putting on a coat to go home is not as simple as it may have initially seemed. Finally, teach functional skills to support independence. Functional skills help to build learners' independence and confidence. Functional skills include basic self-care, activities of daily living, functional academics, lifetime skills of reading, writing, functional math, computer literacy, and effective spoken and written communication, following instructions, paying attention to, comprehending, and complying with instructions, whether written, spoken, or generally understood, self-starting, knowing that something needs to be done, knowing the sequence of steps, and taking the initiative to get going, problem solving, recognizing that a problem exists and either coming up with a resolution or asking for assistance when necessary, and emergency procedures, being able to stay calm and knowing what to do in the event of a fire, whether emergency, medical emergency, or other crisis situation. Also, in the workplace, young people will be better equipped to apply their functional skills to scenarios, familiar or unfamiliar, to solve particular problems. Functional skills will help young people to express themselves better, to produce a logical and persuasive paper or presentation, or write a successful job application. Functional skills can help them to manage their bills and finances at college, universities, or when they start work and use the internet to access services or online banking. Is there a difference between treating students equally and fairly? Yes. Treating children equally means treating them in exactly the same manner, regardless of any quantifiable differences between them. Treating children fairly means treating them with consideration of those differences. Take bedtime, for example, as regards two siblings, ages 5 and 10. To treat them equally, one would send them to bed at the same time. To treat them fairly, one would let the older stay up later. Obviously, the younger one wants to be treated equally, while the older one wants to be treated fairly, and rightly so. Take school, for example. To treat all students equally would not be treating them fairly. In a given classroom, not every student is the same. Some students need very little assistance to be successful and have a good understanding, while others need a lot of constant guidance and redirection. It is the teacher's responsibility to ensure students are treated fairly. Yet we still hear statements like, "If I did that for you, I'd have to do it for everyone." To meet individual student needs, teachers must focus on each student as an individual and treat them fairly. The following list includes a variety of ways to reach individual needs: hands-on activities, small group activities, use of smartboard, document camera, Alpha Smart word processor, use of color folders, highlighting directions, behavior or homework charts, group brainstorming, group discussion, individual plans as needed, modified assignments, homework and/or tests based on individual education plans, IEPs. Therefore, we expect that you will treat all students fairly based on their individual needs, not equally. Please make note of these online resources. Click the pause button if you need to. The National Dissemination Center for Children with Disabilities provides information on disabilities and disability-related issues. Children and youth birth to age 22 are the focus. The U.S. Department of Education has links to reports on all aspects of the organization's work, including student aid, legislation, statistics, and school locator. The University of New Mexico Center for Development and Disabilities mission is the full inclusion of people with disabilities and their families in the community. If you have additional questions or comments, please call the Rio Rancho Public Schools Special Services Department at area code 505-896-0667. You can ask to speak to Jerry Reeder, Executive Director of Special Services, Teresa Griffin Golden, Director of Secondary Special Education, or Tamara Wheeler, Director of Elementary Special Education.